Ring of Gyges. What would you do if you took possession of the ring of Gyges and you can decide to evil things? What will be those evil things? Those evil things is murder. Gusto na ko nga kanang mupatay sa dili man as in nga mupatay lang ko sa mga walay mo mga sala, mupatay ko sa tawong naay sala. For like sample kanang ang tawo girip niya ang baye di niya gipatay, so katong tawo nga nang rape mao ang patyon para matagaan og kanang justice tong baye nga yaang girip mao to ko.
If I take the possession of ring of Gyges and decided to do evil things, I would filch some groceries, especially the foods, the canned goods, the fruits, the vegetables, for it is what everyone needs. I would also steal some monies, goods, someone's house or possessions.
Of the ring of Gyges and decided to do evil things, it is that I would steal and threaten to kill them.
If I took possession of the ring of Gyges, the evil things I would do is to take revenge to the person who broke my heart and also the one who hurt me. And also I will put poison to his food to make his feel dizzy and weak. I will beat his as much as I can and I want his to suffer.
If I take the possession of the ring of Gyges and decided the evil things, I would retaliate to the people who hurt me and to my family, physically and emotionally. I will make their life miserable by taking all those valuable things that they treasure a lot, like their career and happy life.
Number 2 question. What do you think would negative consequence of those evil things to your victim? The negative consequence of those evil things that I do in my victims is the family of my victims feel anger and furious. Kay kung 'di ba kung naay mamatay sa ato pamilya, siyempre masakitan nito maluoy ta bitaw sa kuan den. Mapil pa ato pamilya og anger sa gabuhat sa adto nga pagpatay. Ang siyempre ang pamilya masuko pod sa ato sa gapatay.
The negative consequences of those evil things is that the owner of those banks, houses, the groceries, the goods, and also the other possessions of someone, they will be bankrupt or devastated to the point that their things has been stolen by someone they didn't know.
The negative consequence of those evil things to my victims is that they would harbor anger and resentment towards me, and they would likely suffer for the rest of their lives.
The negative consequences to the victim on my first evil action is that he will be scared all along his life because he doesn't have the idea who hurt him. Last one is that the person will feel weak and maybe will be hospitalized due to the poison that I put on the food.
The negative consequences of those evil things to my victims are they will suffer from trauma and they will grieve for the rest of their life. And there is a possibility that they may have a psychological problem.
The 3 question. Describe a society where every individual has a ring similar to the ring of the Gyges. What is the ultimate fate of the society? The society is there is no justice in the society because individual kay ang tanan man god is nanay bitaw power mas magubot bitaw kay kung example isa nakapatay ang isa na pud mobalos, so wala jud injustice kay wala may makakuan bitaw nila, wala makapugong kay individual man gud magpatas anay na sila sa lang power.
If everyone has the same ring of Gyges, the ultimate fate of that society will be a chaotic society. There's no more peace in that community.
A society in which every individual has a ring similar to the ring of Gyges would be a society where everyone has the power to act without fear of consequences. Such society would likely be dire. Without accountability, individuals would be free to engage in immoral behavior.
If every individual has a ring similar to the ring of Gyges, the people in the society will be out of control and the people will be in danger, because not all people will use the power in a good ways, but some of them will doing a bad. Wherein many people would want to have a power to control the world and do things want to have in life, then many people will do unjust to get their interest and desire. Maybe they will kill, be a thief, starting a war, rape, or any act of injustice to satisfy their self-interest.
If every individual in a society had a king of Gyges, the ultimate fate of that society would be chaotic and potentially disastrous. Because the ring of Gyges would have the power to become invisible, it allows everyone to do whatever they wanted without fear of consequences. Number 4 question. The ring of Gyges seems to suggest that if given the cloak of impurity, all men would prefer to do injustice because it is wiser to do so. But according to Plato, what is really the moral of the story behind the ring of Gyges?
For me, the moral of the story behind the ring of Gyges is to give more importance to the power than the God who created.
The moral story of the ring of Gyges is that Plato uses the story to get us consider whether we, the Gyges, behave in a morally acceptable fashion simply for fear or being caught doing wrong. Unlike Gyges, we will discontinue our efforts to be morally wrong. They aren't afraid of doing wrong things, for they possess such kind of power.
The moral of the story behind the ring of Gyges, as presented by Plato in his Republic, is that morality is not simply a matter of external circumstances or the avoidance of punishment. Rather, the true morality is an internal virtue that is rooted in reason and wisdom.
So my answer in the question number 4 is that the moral of the story behind the ring of Gyges is that no one would be able to be trusted, and therefore it shows us that justice is always self-interested and thus really not justice, but a form of injustice. And also, a bad person could be as happy or perhaps even happier than a good person, and it means that we can never be truly happy unless we're living in a virtuous life.
According to Plato, the moral story behind the ring of Gyges is that power has a corrupting influence on individuals.
Set 2. Explain why accepting the belief that right action are right because God commands them posits a problem as well in divine command theory.
For me, accepting the belief that right actions are right because God commands them posits a problem as well divided command theory. Things are being bad because God forbids them, and the things become right because God commands them. For sabotable naman kayo, so dili na ako siya i-explain.
Accepting the belief that right actions are right because God commands them posits a problem in divine command theory. The truth is that actions are right because it is not the command of God. God is the center of morality, and He is the one who do the rules of right.
Accepting the belief that right actions are right because God commands them possesses a problem in divine command theory because it raises the question of whether moral truths are arbitrary or independent of God's will. The Euthyphro dilemma challenges the coherence of divine command theory and forces us to consider alternative theories of morality.
So according to the statement of right actions are right because God commands them posits a problem in divine command theory is that because if God decides what is right and what is wrong doing just by seeing it, and also the concept of godness and value becomes a vacuous claim. And also right actions are right because God approves them, and wrongdoings are wrong because God disapproves them. Then lastly, God's command is good and also it is right, and what He commands are needed to obey.
Accepting the belief that right actions are right because God's commands that actions are morally good. This means that any action, regardless of how harmful or unjust it may be, could be considered morally good if God commands it. This would also mean that there is no reason for us to follow God's commands if they are not based on some objective moral standard.
Number 2 questions. Explain why accepting the belief that right actions are commanded by God because they are right possess a problem as well in divine command theory.
My answer in the statement that right actions are commanded by God because they are right possess a problem as well as divine command theory. For me, God commands us to perform right action because they are right. So kita gi-command sa Ginoo para kita mahimutang matarong. That's all. Thank you.
The explanation for the statement right actions are commanded by God because they are right possesses a problem as well as in divine command theory, for that doesn't mean that God chooses right for its on your moral actions. Morality means doing the right thing. This doesn't mean that it is the command of God for it is the right. God is our creator and we as his creation must follow the morality of God for he is our beloved Father.
Accepting the belief that right actions are commended by God because they are right raises the question of how we determine what is right and wrong independent of God's commands. These require a standard of morality that exists independently of God's will, which presents a challenge for those who hold the morality is fundamentally grounded in God's commands. In summary, accepting the belief that right actions are commended by God because they are right possesses a problem for divine command theory because it suggests that moral truth exists independently of God's will, which undermines the central claim of the theory.
So regarding to the statement, accepting the belief that right actions are commanded by God because they are right possesses a problems as well as in divine command theory. So my opinion is that God is not omnipotent because maybe there is one thing that doesn't stem from him, or maybe he will base it on someone else and also God just uses it. Someone else creates the right actions and God just uses it to command people, then there is maybe a more powerful than God if he uses other people's ideas that he commands.
Accepting the belief that right actions are commanded by God because they are right, that God commands action because they are morally good. This would mean that moral principles and obligation exist outside of God and that God is simply recognizing and endorsing them. In this case, it would also mean that we can determine what is morally good and bad without relying on God.
So number 3 question. Can you think of a way to evade both horns of this dilemma?
I think of a way to evade both horns of these dilemmas. One possible response to the Euthyphro dilemma is to simply accept that if God does command correctly, then inflicting it upon others would be morally obligatory.
The only way to evade both horns of this dilemma is that we mustn't think of things that is against the divine command theory or the moral theory or the natural law. We must not think of those immoral acts.
One possible way to evade both horns of the Euthyphro dilemma is to argue that the question itself is based on a false dichotomy. These can be done by asserting that the concept of goodness is not dependent on the commands of the deity, but rather on a more fundamental aspect of reality or human reasoning and experience. Alternatively, one could adopt a non-theistic approach to morality and argue that moral principles are based on rational considerations such as justice, fairness, and compassion. Ultimately, evading the horns of the Euthyphro dilemma requires challenging the assumption that morality depends on the commands of a deity and exploring alternative ways of understanding the nature of morality.
So let us say that morality is somehow dependent upon God. We all know that God is not kind of God who will let us do wrong. This theory claims that morality is ultimately based on the commands or character of God, and that's the morally right action is the one that God commands and requires. We need to accept that if God does command cruelty, then inflicting it upon others would be morally obligatory.
The Euthyphro dilemma can be resolved by adopting a different ethical framework such as consequentialism, which evaluates the morality of an action based on its consequences. A false dichotomy can be resolved by positing that God commands actions that are in line with the principles of love, compassion, and justice, reflecting an objective moral standard that transcends any religious tradition.